Ko kura hapo te waka, ko pohurihanga te tangata, ko maunga piko te maunga, ko paringaringa te wahapu, ko te reo mihi te whare tipuna, ko Ngāti Kuri tōku e mihi atu nei, ko Sandy Ringham tōku ingo. Kia ora whānau, welcome. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all here to this morning's session for the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. My name is Sandy, I'm a tutor, I'm a Māori mentor and a graduate student here at the university. Today we have an exciting program with all three schools from FAS being represented. Presenters will have 20 minutes to present and then after that we'll have 5 minutes for questions. Dr. Tom Ryan here will present our first speaker today. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Sandy. Ngā mihi nui ki a Kīngitanga, kia ora ngā koutou katoa. And kia ora to the speakers in particular and the organisers and to all the audience. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Vincent Malcolm-Buchanan. Vincent Malcolm-Buchanan. And Vince, I was a supervisor for a number of years while he completed his PhD thesis, which was part of a project run by Professor Ngāhuia Te Aokachuku and Linda Nikora. And Vince was part of that, and I was one of the supervisors of his PhD, which was an ethnographic study of contemporary world. And this is part of that. Vince also, earlier this year, he was a research fellow at the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, which is a great honour. And the paper he is going to be giving, he has presented before at the Anthropology Association of Oceania, held in New Mexico, so this is the second major time. So, and Vince's paper is called the Urupā Memorialisation The Hilton Hotel Row, and it refers to, in particular to Vince's, he will be talking about the Urupā of Pikiao. Vince also with his other collection, which is two. Okay, Vince, over to you. You're up. Yes, please.
How does it work?
Nā te whaura me tu wata ngā maunga. Rotoiti tōku mana me whirina ki tōku awa. Ngā te Pikiao me tūhoi ngā iwi, ngā te tama te tūtaki ka o te me ngā te whare ki o kūhapuru, uruika, me wai puti o ki o kūrārai. Tēnā koutou katoa, as the cover slide indicates, today I'll be speaking to the conjunction of tangihanga, memorialisation, Māori, and specifically some of our Urupā practices. Very briefly, I'm also very cognizant that the timetable had a shift in it. In fact, you're probably sitting in this room not aware that you're about to spend 20 minutes looking at a presentation regarding Urupā and tangihanga. However, in the way of Māori, we're just going to roll with this, people. I have to appear at Auckland, so I've been shifted into this slot. My apologies to my fellow presenters because it means the shuffle, and to Sandy, we are running on a very tight time frame here. Mō taku ki. Now, the genesis of this work is doctoral thesis material, so it's appropriate to acknowledge the Tangi Research Program, as Tom mentioned, particularly the supervisors, Professor Ngāhuia Te Aokachuku, Professor Linda Waimari and Nikora, and also Tom. Also, as he mentioned, I presented this work earlier in the United States, New Mexico, at the ASAO conference.
And I was very proud to be the only New Zealand and Māori presenter on the Pacific contingent. Hence the work looks specifically at Māori burial practices, memorialisation, and the paper is intended for publication in 2017 because it's currently being worked on. 2016, my apologies. Now in 2014, TV1 presented the self-titled documentary, Billy Connolly's Big Send-Off, wherein he painted a picture of death as this grand adventure. They can involve granite, draped monuments, statuesque archways, water feature obelisks, and $1 million interment estates. I watched that and I thought to myself, wow, I'm so proud that Māori haven't gotten that ridiculously ostentatious yet. I now take my words back. We have not arrived at that level of ostentatious extravagance when it comes to treating our dead and memorialising them. However, I don't know that this will remain the case, particularly if we consider the past centuries' rapid developments in our interment and memorialisation practices, because, quote, our modern Urupā already reveal impressive physical markers with professional photographic images, poignant inscriptions, and so forth. I want to quickly address the question of what an Urupā is, or burial ground is, by firstly clarifying what it is not. We are all familiar with graveyards, distinguished because, as the name implies, these are graves found in the consecrated yards of churches. Graveyards were popular when churches exercised more social control than they do today, and older church graveyards with limited space for interment understandably came to be filled quickly. We're all familiar with cemeteries. Derived from the Greek word meaning sleeping place, the more secular, all-encompassing cemeteries do not require a church. They are often located on the outskirts of an urban area and are generally managed by municipal authorities, which allows for state-controlled disposal of the dead, so accommodating social concerns of biomedical priorities. Cemeteries became popular as graveyards filled to capacity and urban populations increased along with secular ideologies. Today both terms are used interchangeably to denote a burial ground. However, Urupā are distinct, as we'll see momentarily, and notably today there are modern Urupā in cemeteries, such as at Waikato in Auckland, if you're familiar with that location. Over time, Māori came to be buried at each of these various spaces, but these were of course not our earliest traditions. I've been given a microphone. I'm Te Arawa, we don't need that. Kia ora. Now, as with all peoples, the disposal and safe decomposition of our dead is important. Prior to the 19th century, Māori practiced entrenched and unique interment traditions involving primary and secondary burial processes, which the likes of Dancy and Best speak of. Putting it simply, we undertook an initial burial process, awaited decomposition, then we retrieved the remains before we undertook the final process of preparing and interring the cleaned and adorned or ornamented bones. And if we take on board Stephen Deed's master's thesis, which was later published, then we can see that the earliest Māori transposed burial traditions well evidenced throughout the Pacific. That is to say that our dead were pre-contact, interred within close proximity to the living, in sacred but easily accessible spaces near marae. One of the doyens of anthropology in New Zealand wrote variously of Pacifican traditions of burying the dead within close proximity of settlements, Similarly, our own Dr. Judith MacDonald here at the University of Waikato has spoken about the Tikapian burial traditions, wherein they sleep in large, big houses, and the living sleep on one side, and on the other side of the big house are their dead interred. So we can surmise that in Aotearoa, pre-contact Māori initially buried their dead within close proximity to settlements. But as numbers grew, competition for limited resources increased, as did tribal conflicts. And so the bones of the deceased had to be protected from others who would deliberately desecrate them. And so our burial places, such as the Palliser Bay burial site, which both Deed and Salmon's work referred to, does actually evidence how we shifted dramatically from common public spaces close to past settlements to secret and concealed locations. And there the remains would rest undisturbed in a highly restricted space, intentionally safe from visitation or defilement. Now, these concealed spaces included caves, which brings me to one of the better known New Zealand exemplars of the Mary Island Lake Hauroko cave burial, discovered at the Fiordlands in 1967 and written of extensively, particularly by Simmons in the Otago Museum records. There are numerous commentaries, accounts and images, as well as this pencil sketch by Maureen O'Rourke. However, that is not a cave burial site of my people. But my people, Pikiao and Tuhoi, do have them located, for example, on our tribal lands of Matawhora, which, like Mary Island, is nestled in tribal waters. The late 1905 image on your left is somewhat romanticised by Blomfield. It's an oil painting of Matawhora within Lake Rotoiti, while the image on your right is Matawhora today. Blomfield can be seen to have taken some artistic liberty. That said, he did actually capture my great-grandparents' Tapuaeharuru, our village, and our homestead, for want of another word, in 1905. And more importantly, you can see Matawhora, my rangatira grandfather, who I called my dad, also an Apotaro with the Ratana Church, instructed me about the cave dwellings that are located in those hills. I'll touch on those in just a moment. For now, of course, Māori and Pākehā sought out to etch a common world in New Zealand. But that said, caves were not our only options in this case. Māori did use specific trees, particularly the hollowed limbs of the puriri. Do you like my Google images? I'll put up a couple of puriri there. Now, to bring it back, and so the remains were really well hidden in these trees, which of course trees last long time, so Māori thought they're safe. We don't have to worry about this. My karawa dad died in 2006, but in 2005, of course, Matata had the landslides. So one of the first things that he did in 2005 was to ring the Whakatane Council, use his authority, which was considerable, and instruct them that when you find bones, they are not from the cemetery, they are our people. You must retrieve them, they must be returned to Ngāti Rangitihi, which fortunately was the case. And before I shift into modernity, I also want to mention the use of wakatu pāpaku, practiced by few tribes. Archaeological evidence suggests that they were in use for 300 years. Eileen Fox wrote the commentary and catalogue referenced here, and I don't want to get caught up in this topic because my people, Te Aroha and Tuhoi, did not use wakatu te pāpaku, but it is nonetheless appropriate to mention them. I do, however, want to use this moment to touch on Best's words. Today, Māori have adopted practices that were initially prevalent only amongst our noble and elite, such as the tangihanga process in Taia. However, I want to emphasise, as I did in my PhD, that whether of good birth, noble birth, or common, all Māori coexisted alongside each other. And so they either participated in, witnessed, or observed as much, regardless whether they were in turn so treated. And notably ensuring the remains stayed undisturbed in an inviolable space was as critical an aspect then, in earlier times, as it is today. A contentious point which I'll touch on presently. So as I said, Māori and Pākehā sought to etch out a common world in New Zealand, and our people necessarily adapted our tangihanga practices and Urupā traditions. We ceased our secondary burial traditions altogether, and by the late 19th century we were solely confining ourselves to primary burial processes, which brings me to Wahanui. This is one of several Urupās scattered throughout my people's lands and to which we have unencumbered access. For my whānau, this is our contemporary burial location. It is not our only common or modern Urupā. There is another former burial site located back and beyond Wahanui, but this is our current Urupā and has been for almost a century. So Urupā are private Māori burial grounds. They are most often located adjacent to pā, marae, and or kāinga. They're nowadays common to all iwi, but they are iwi specific, and they're culturally defined sites. And they cater to the members of specific iwi interconnected by descent and shared tribal affiliation. And just as with graveyards and cemeteries, Urupā serve to dispose of the dead. They are safe spaces upon which we are increasingly seeing the arrival of cremains. They are fenced spaces free from roaming and burrowing animals, though not all. And they are, of course, socially sanctioned containment environments, be that from biomedical and, more interestingly to Māori, other world contamination as well. I wrote in my doctorate that my people are a sentimental people, particularly when it comes to our dead. So whilst Urupā serve these purposes, they notably reflect for our people that whilst our dead are gone, they are nonetheless still here. Which is to say that our Urupā are significant sites of memorialisation, where the living watch over, we revisit, we reminisce, and we even re-engage with our dead, emotionally, spiritually, and some would even argue physically. However, 3 decades ago at Rotoiti, Wahanui, we were not as ostentatious or extravagant with our Urupā memorials as it appears that we are becoming today. For example, the memorial headstones from my great-grandparents' generation are simple slab tablets with biographical data inscribed. These are the headstones of my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother. They are succinct. They're amongst the oldest headstones at Wahanui. There are a few older ones. Now these tablets sit upright in the ground. The older ones sit down flat with even less data on them. It's quite interesting to see. And most importantly, I thought, quite fascinating, the older tablets do not mention the names of the living. Their son, my karaua dad, had told me that we never used to place the names of the living alongside those of the dead. This is echoed in my aunt's interview. And during my childhood, this was to some degree still being practiced, because during taniahanga our aunts and kuias used to get us kids to run around when flowers arrived and pull out the cards. We never knew why. We were just told, get the cards out. Now, for those of you who are mature enough, you might remember the Perspex bowl that came from florists. And at Rotoiti, people used to comment about, oh, Te Arawa can be flash. Look at all those lovely Perspex bowls on the veranda, thinking that our kuia put them there to make the maho look pretty. It was because you couldn't get into the Perspex bowls, so they weren't permitted next to the body. But it did make the maho look pretty at the same time. So, nonetheless, change and adaptation are now common in Aotearoa, and today condolence cards with the names of the living can be seen clearly propped up with floral arrangements at tanianga. And half a century later, we can see consequences of the temporal generational shift from the time period of my great-grandparents' headstones to two examples here of their 12 children's headstones, my grandfather's, which differ to those of their parents. On the left is my mother's biological father, on the right is his younger brother, my mother's puipuia or matua whāngai. Now, by this time we see the emergence of coloured marble tablets. We see floral and patterned borders with varying fonts. Biographical data now includes the names of deceased and living children. And just as noticeably, we suddenly see the emergence of photographic images of the dead. These could simply reflect technological advancements in stone masonry that contributed to these changes, and of course the once incredibly expensive camera, by the time my grandfathers passed away, had become a common feature. So perhaps that contributed to how photos appeared. I've been given the 5-minute card. You did that beautifully. Kia ora. That brings me to the title of this paper, The Hilton Hotel Row, which deliberately also has a play on the notion of the Hilton Hotel Row. And to be prudent to my whanaunga, I have tried to give you discrete pictorial exemplars. It's a distinctive row of 10 headstones, and if you look at this row of 10 headstones, you will see various sized hearts, open books, stairways to heaven, teardrops. You'll see monolithic. Think about this one, when they unveiled this one, my mother and my mother's family were successfully short people. She said to their children, what on earth are you doing putting that monstrosity on top of my cousin? It's bigger than she was in life. Not to be outdone, when our mother passed away, she had selected her own headstone, and of course she'd taken the best of the singular ones, and Mummy's one has the angel holding the heart. So that's the Hilton Hotel Row. I think at this point I've used a few minutes to speak briefly to the changes and adaptation, and this isn't the only new and an innovative activity unfolding at Māori Urupā. During my PhD, my chief supervisor, Ngā Hui Te Awa Kōtuku, reminded me of the new things going inside the caskets, including iPods, mobile phones, which initially one wouldn't challenge a mobile phone going down until the olds pull you up and say, are the photos removed? And people don't think, well, no, the photos of the living are still on the phone. Not good. To the old people, the young people, kaore mohi oi rātou. Yeah? So once again, it is indicating change and adaptation. And my had a moko pass away and her parents wanted to put this in. Ne? How I said at the beginning, 2014, Billy Connolly. We would never be that ostentatious and extravagant. A catacombo sound system which will play hymns and lullabies for eternity. Starting price, $20,000. Hence I had to stop briefly and write this paper. Speaking of which, although we don't put photos of the living with the dead, in 2014 I was personally fascinated to watch worldwide televisation of the funeral casket for Peaches Geldof. Stunning. Look at those pictures. I rushed home to my olds and they wouldn't dare look at them. Her living husband, her living children, and even her living dogs are up there. Some controversy to our people. Wrapping up now, my dear. Very quickly, and touching very briefly on the fact that, this is tangihana, this is Urupā. Controversy, Māori, we do this well. Particularly in matters of death. One need but mention the ongoing Takamore case, similar to the occurrence of Billy T. James, Tūpāpaku, the roving remains of Honeheke. In fact, there are perhaps a surprising number of controversial cases, as well as some stunning academic work, including a beautiful paper that I refer to in my PhD by Dr. Carl Mika here at this university. I mention these solely as exemplars of controversy. They are not the purpose of this paper. They simply reflect the concerns of our people to ensure the remains of our dead stay undisturbed and inviolate. Or maybe Urupā are simply exemplars of a much bigger picture where Te Ao Māori is integrating new aspects of economics and technology. Raises several other questions. In conclusion, as I said at the outset, this remains a working paper which is currently being peer reviewed with ASAO colleagues. In posing questions about Urupā, I have to admit, as any fully fledged and accomplished academic, I've answered 3 questions and raised 30 questions. It's been a wonderful exercise. I thank you for spending this time. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora, Vince, for that really interesting presentation. I particularly found it interesting about the mobile phones and photos going into the casket. I would never have thought that people would do that, putting photos in a casket. On behalf of the university, I'd like to thank you and the organisers of Kīngitanga. And does anybody? We'll just take a couple of minutes for questions. We're running a little over time, so does anybody have any questions?
I've just got one. As a working paper, cremation, because Māori, we're all over the place.
Kia ora.
Cremation has been coming up as sort of an issue in how we mourn, how we dispose
Kia ora.
of the ashes. And it's just funny, I was talking to a cousin last week and we just, wondered, is there any body of research or coming research as to how Māori are dealing with the new form of disposal and cremation?
Kia ora motu whānau. That's a good one, and often at conferences we encounter the question of cremains. One of the stories that we have with the research team, my colleague Bridget may recount the story being told at Hui in Wānanga, how one of our people, his wife passed away in Australia. He had her cremains ready, he brought her home. When they arrived at the marae, the kuia and karaua were utterly stupefied because they were expecting a casket, and out comes this urn. Not only that, he never interred it, he couldn't let her go, so he travels back and forth between Australia and New Zealand. How are we dealing with it? Is it typical of Māori? We roll with it. We have no kaupapa, we have no tikanga no kawa, except to respect the right of the dead and the wishes of the living. It's anomalous. We are learning this. We also know that graveyards and cemeteries are full. Urupā are filling. It's now becoming common for people to ask to be cremated in order to, one, stop the expense of international transportation home so that they can still be brought home. And two, well, if there's no place at the Urupā, just sprinkle me on top of mum. I'll be fine. So we have no kawa o tikanga except that, and to which we are adapting in the way of being Māori. I hope that answers your question. Kia ora.
Any others? Sure, Vince.